Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. We're heading to southeast Kentucky, and we're going to head to the home of GoWild. What's GoWild? Well, Brad Luttrell is going to tell us about it today. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, we've been trying to do it for a while, and interesting, I just saw on Gear Junkies that Steve Rinella, let's give a shout out to Steve Rinella, just bought First Light.
Yep. We were just chatting about that.
Yeah, we were just chatting about that. And folks, if you're not familiar with Meat Eater and Steve Rinella, you ought to be, because he's a growing brand in the outdoor industry. And so that's a free one for you, Steve Rinella. So let's get back to GoWild. Let's talk about the backstory and why an advertising executive decided to get in the outdoor industry, which is a tough industry, as we both know.
It is tough. And it's kind of funny because we actually ended up starting a podcast because we got into this thing with no connections, and people kind of saw us doing it and they said, how did you do this? And kept having inquiries about not necessarily our brand. Not that we weren't having inquiries, but we were getting inquiries in volume of people just saying, hey, I want to start a company in the outdoors. How did you do it? So that's where our podcast actually kind of took off. And we do a little bit of a different show from there, which is how to navigate relationships and interviewing people who have built their career in the outdoors. So it's definitely not an easy thing to do. We mentioned POMA before. That's what I spoke at POMA last week about, was how to build relationships within the industry and how to develop those and help them mature. So back to your question of like, how do you go from advertising to GoWild? I was very entrepreneurial. If I can take this story back about 7 years before I even got into GoWild, I look at where I was in my career. I was a journalist, and I was doing wedding photos. I was working for newspapers. I was shooting for magazines, local colleges, whatever I could do to make money. And I realized that was 2009 and 10, and it was apparent that that was going to be a very hard way for me to make a living. And I realized I wanted to really get into something that was less work for hire. As a freelancer, it's either feast or famine a lot of times. And after a few cold seasons here in Louisville, Kentucky, trying to really get a paycheck, I decided to get into advertising, applied to 40 jobs, don't hear back from much of anybody, but then somebody gave me a shot finally. And I got into social media, and that turned into a PR job, writing press releases and working with clients. And eventually would go on to, I met my now co-founder, and actually two of my co-founders at that first agency. And it's kind of a funny story. I ended up getting fired with him over another company that we were trying to start. And that's a much longer story, but the highlight of that is we've always been entrepreneurial minded, and the company found out about it, and they didn't take too kindly to people having that kind of ambition, really wanted us to focus on their agency. So at the time, we both go on to other companies. We don't even work together for a while. And then 2 years later, we try to get a company going again, and we just weren't passionate about it. I think that's so critical when you start anything, is you have to have passion. You have to be excited about what you're doing, or otherwise, when those late night emails and that late night research, or up at 4:30 and 5 a.m., which I'm prone to doing. When I was working at the agency a year and a half ago, my life was waking up early and going to bed late so I could work on this. And if you aren't passionate about it, you're going to have a hard time pushing yourself to do that. So we tried at that company one more time, and a restaurant data analytics company, which some of your listeners probably just hit snooze fest. And so did we. That kind of went away, and I had the bug. I had this entrepreneurial bug. I wanted to do something, and I just kept researching. And while I'm trying to figure out the career side, I'm also trying to learn to be a better hunter. I had been hunting with a guy, and I was starting to learn from him. And then for a couple of reasons, we stopped hunting together, and I have to start doing this on my own. And I start to realize there is a lot to learn here. I actually wasn't a good hunter. I just happened to be hunting with someone that knew a lot more than me and was helping me with a lot of it. So as I started trying to learn about whitetail hunting, I'd grown up squirrel hunting and fishing mostly and just playing outside as a kid, not hunting a ton. As I started trying to learn this, I'm like, okay, this is kind of crazy. It's 2016 at the time. Every time I start Googling, I'm in Kentucky and I'm finding information about mule deer hunting. Like, that's not helpful to me at all. Or I'm finding out how people hunt whitetail in Nebraska. And it's like, that's useless to me in Kentucky. It's a whole different landscape and scenario and time of year and different regulations. And I'm like, how is this 2016? We're living in the Facebook era and Instagram era, even Snapchat, and no one's created a way for people to connect with each other about the outdoors. And I started doing research on it, and I had built and branded hundreds of websites and branding projects for companies. And I'm looking at all these digital products in the hunting industry, and I'm like, well, I can do better than that. That thought started the whole thing. I literally sat down after putting my wife works nights, and I had just one son at the time. I now have two kids, but I put my boy to bed one night and I just started Googling. And then it went from Googling like hunting apps to looking at everything that's out there. And then I Googled, it went to like how to raise money for a company. I had no idea how to do this stuff. And it all just kind of snowballed, man. I mean, a month later, I'm meeting with a guy at Chipotle. He comes on as my co-founder, and pick up 2 more by the end of the year. And we built the product in 7 months and got it on the market in 9. It's just been this crazy whirlwind of a ride, like drinking from a fire hose, of how far it's come from then. What it comes down to is I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I had a problem for myself that I saw was worth solving for, and I went after it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Want to become a smarter deer hunter? Know when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Well, Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created to do exactly that, because many people have told me they struggle with spending all days in the woods and never seeing a deer, only shooting does and young deer, leaving the woods empty-handed way too many times. Found Mr. Wonderful, but just couldn't get on him, having difficult finding a place to hunt, recognizing possible mistakes you're making every year, having tried and failed to find qualified mentors who deliver results. If you had these frustrations or struggles, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com, and there you'll find a 13-module course to help you solve these problems. Again, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com and find some answers.
Now, we mentioned POMA and folks, Professional Outdoor Media Association. Both Brad and I are members, and Brad did speak last week about relationships. Why don't you speak a little bit about that, because it's going to be on Gear Wednesday. I want to help people understand what it takes to embrace a career in the outdoors. It's hard. I've been at 4 years, and I love what I do, and I've got a membership, Deer Hunting Institute, coming online in July. But it's not for the faint of heart. You mentioned going to bed late and getting up early. I have a VA now, but before I had the virtual assistant, I had to do everything myself.
Yep.
And it was hard. So let's speak just 5 minutes about what you spoke to the Professional Outdoor Media Association folks about.
Yeah, that's great. And I pulled up my slides here so I could kind of jog my memory at the end. But essentially the first half of my presentation was everything I just told you about. What we've done as a product, how this got started. And I really had no connections. But what I did have was a good understanding of how to build them. You know, if advertising taught me anything, it was how to listen to people's problems and find what problem I needed to solve for first. You know, you really have to look at, if you're trying to build any relationship, you have to approach it from what can I do for them first. And so we've approached everything we've done with that manner. So we had a really great product. You have a social element to GoWild. And, you know, kind of didn't really mention what GoWild is. So I guess I'll hit that real quick. I know we kind of said app. There's a lot of different versions of hunting apps. We are not a mapping app. Everybody knows OnX. We are not that. If I can frame it up for your listeners who are probably really familiar with that product, OnX is going to help you find and create your story with its mapping. GoWild is going to help you share that story. So we have a social component that helps you share and learn. So you can ask questions with other members in the community. You can share your story and get feedback. And that creates a lot of social conversation within our platform. We've been really good at that from day one. It's not about making friends or followers first. we're content first. So you don't have to have a following to post in the app and to get a ton of feedback on it. Some kid last night, I say kid, I think this was a young man, sorry if he's not, posted his first squirrel that he had gotten. And he's like, I have no idea what to do with these things. And in 24 hours, he got 20 comments. This was yesterday. 20 comments on something as niche as squirrel hunting. There's not a whole lot. In fact, small game is in decline. So there's not a lot of people that really understand that very well. But you came to our platform, hardly any followers because he's still new. He just started the account recently. And yet he was able to get help. So that's what we do really well. And we've also rolled out activity tracking so we can track your data. And maybe we'll come back around and talk a little bit about that more in a minute. And then we've got podcast functionality, recipe functionality. We're really trying to help you tell your story throughout the year and also get better throughout the year. So we built this platform and we started connecting with big brands. I mean, last year we got in touch with Garmin, and that was all from a cold email that we pushed on. And part of my message on POMO was just showing how much work it takes to get to some of these relationships. It was like hundreds of emails to get that Garmin deal done in a span of 9 months from the time it started to when we wrapped it up. And we've been in the room with some other really big companies that we haven't announced yet, but these events or these milestones that we've gotten to, they've taken countless 36 emails over 90 days in one example that I had, and then 36 emails and text, and just constantly trying to make it happen with a contact to be able to just get one meeting. And sometimes you might think like, well, you should have given up and moved on to the next one, but you have to look at the opportunity and what's in front of you and how much, if it's a certain mom and pop company, maybe that is right. Maybe take a hint, but at a certain size company, when you're talking to these Fortune 500s or 100s or 50s, that's kind of what you sign up for when you want to work with somebody like that. So it takes a lot of work just to get to the table, and you're almost proving yourself in that you got to the table. A lot of the proof is in the pudding, and that you showed up, you were consistent, you did what you said you would do. So this leads into the part of my presentation that I have here where anybody that wants to get into this industry or any industry, when you're networking, don't take things personally. People are not going to respond. They're not going to do what they said they would do. They're going to forget because their job is not your job. Your job is to figure out how you can help them. Their job is to make their boss think that they're the greatest employee they have, right? They're trying to impress their boss. So you have to prove how you're going to help them do that. I think a lot of people too rush the ask. So you have to take your time getting to know people and find out what their pain points are. Find out what you already do well, how it can help that person with something they need to do well. See where you overline, and don't make this about you. If you want to network better and build better relationships, focus on adding value to that person's life or career. And you're going to build a relationship that whether they're with that company or the next company they go to, you're going to get a lot back out of that because you cared about them as a person. Relationships are about trust, Bruce. When I think about all the success we've seen from companies, it really comes down to you never want to break their confidence. You want to deliver what you said you would do. And winning the business isn't one action. It's a series of micro decisions. If I say I was going to follow up next Monday morning, I'm going to follow up at 9:05 and hit you exactly when I said I would. And through all of this effort, I think this comes back to one of my favorite quotes. And some people don't agree with this, but the quote is, I sure do get lucky when I work hard. I mean, serendipity, I guess, happens. But the takeaway for me is that more than anything, you might get an introduction by coincidence. You might run into somebody in an elevator. Hey, you're trying to sell fishing lures and you accidentally run into Johnny Morris in an elevator. You didn't know he's going to be there, right? Like that's luck. Like that alone is not going to get your fishing lures put into Bass Pro just like that, right? Like what you do with the luck is going to matter the most. And a lot of times I think maybe all the decisions you made prior to that got you to a conference where Johnny Morris was there. I think people overlook all the hard work that they put in before that. So our motto here is to keep that in mind. And there's a bunch of variations of this, and it's been said 100 different ways. I always jokingly quote the Notorious B.I.G., the rapper, and say, treat every day like you're the intern. We think of it that way here. Never going to get full of ourselves. Always looking at the individual members that we talk to every day and think about how we can help them. And then also our client partners from whether that's the Garmin's or the First Lights of the world or all the way down to the mom and pop brands that we've worked with. We're going to bust our humps to make sure that they're getting something back out of it. That in a nutshell was my about a 10-minute, maybe 12-minute presentation. But the gist of it was really focus on your relationships and focus on the people first. I see this all the time with GoWild. We get hit up with people that see that we're a tech company in the outdoors and they think we have all this money from startup money. And they hit us up for hey, will you all sponsor my YouTube channel? Like, there's no like buy me a drink first or anything. It's just coming in hot and heavy. And that's just not how this works. People that show up like that, you're lucky to get an email. I respond to pretty much everything I get, but like with any brand, you're lucky if they even respond to you. It's very distasteful. It takes time to build a relationship.
So listeners, I hope you're hearing this. It takes time. The other thing is two things that come across really strong. He's extremely passionate about what he's doing. And he has the confidence that he can sit down with anybody and tell a story. It's his story. He knows his story. And there isn't any, well, and I think, or gee, here's what I do. Here's what I can deliver. I want to understand your pain. So help me understand your pain. The only way you can do that is to listen.
I'm definitely a talker, but there is a time when you need to, sometimes in a meeting, you just got to shut up and ask them, like, what are you trying to solve for? What is your boss measuring you by? And that's a great way to figure out how you can help people. And maybe you can't. Companies or influencers or writers, whatever it is, you try to force something sometimes, and maybe the timing's not right. And maybe it's, okay, you know what? I'm going to follow up with you in 6 months and just see how things are going. A lot of times you're going to be building this network over time and for the next thing, or it might be your next company. You don't know where these relationships are going to go, but I do think slowing down and taking a little bit of time to figure out that person's what they need and then how you can deliver to it. That's one of the most critical things here.
Now, can you hit the green share and bring us into your app?
Chris could do that. I don't have it on my computer. I'm not the developer. I could pull it in.
Okay, wait a minute. I'll share on mine.
Okay.
And then we're going to GoWild.com, right?
Now it's time to GoWild.com.
Okay.
That'll pull up the site. Our platform right now is primarily through the app. We don't have a web face, but this will take you to our site and you can see a little bit of our branding and material. This is where you're going to come to download the app. It's got all of our links on what you can do with the platform. Like right there, we're hitting you with that Garmin integration that we developed for. You can go and read about that. And if you scroll down, it's going to outline a little bit of the functionality of the platform right there in the middle. Go up a little bit. So the follow content, track activities, and tell your story. Each one of those has a little blue link in it that you can get into and learn a little bit more about how we do that. Like following content, for example, this is much different than the way you build an Instagram following. You have to have a following, right? You're typically not going to get a whole lot of interaction with other people that don't follow you until you get to be a little bit bigger. These influencers can get enough reach to get into that explore page. But when you first set up your Instagram account, if somebody's following you, and we'll see the content. In fact, like Instagram's own data says that 70% of its content goes unseen. It's a very difficult place to build a following. Our platform focuses on the content, which is what you see here. So when you tap that little compass in the actual phone, you'll see at the bottom there's a compass. Then all of those that you see, whether it's bass fishing, noodling, fly fishing, big game hunting, whatever it is, there's like 50 different things you can follow along with. Those are all content forms. So when you post, it'll ask you which of those you want to post to. So if I posted a small game, it's going to hit people that are also interested in small game. So I don't need to have a following. I could have 3 followers on GoWild and still hit the tens of thousands of people that are in the platform. So it's quite a bit different from what people are used to because of that. It's really it's more like a Reddit. If anybody's familiar with Reddit, you can go into Reddit, and if you're into gaming or hunting or real estate, it doesn't matter. There's a place where you can find what other people that are like-minded. GoWild functions much more like that. So in the middle here, you have the activity tracking, and that portion is talking about our Garmin integration, but it's also talking about, so here in the middle, this is really talking about we're going to help you track. Actually, click that link right there where it says GoWild's activity track, and I think that's the one that we should really be linking to here. So this is going to help outline all of the different activities you can do within the platform. Now, actually, I was just talking to the team this morning. We got to get this page updated because we've since launched fishing tracking. So what that's going to do is you pull up your GoWild app on the phone, and you're going to hit the plus sign, and then up in the top right, there's an activity tracking, and that's going to pull up a whole host of activities. So saltwater fishing, noodling, fly fishing, and click any of those. What we're going to do is we're going to track your elevation, track any photos you take. We're going to overlay those on an anonymized map. So if you're paddling while you're fishing a river, we're going to track how many miles you went, but we're not going to share your location, right? Because hunters and anglers are pretty particular about that. They don't want to share their location per se. So it's going to track all that for you. It pulls it into a nice tight story that you have there, and you can actually see, I actually paddled, I thought I went 3 miles, but it was 4.5. Are the photos collected from the spot where I was really tearing it up, and there's 5 or 6 photos of the bass I was catching right there under that train trestle or whatever it is. It pulls together in a nice narrative that you can dynamically scroll through and interact with, which is a lot different, right, than just posting a couple pictures when you come back. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I use some of these other platforms too, but this is a different way of thinking. If people are familiar with like a Runkeeper or a Strava or a MapMyFitness, what those are doing for running, we're doing for hunting and fishing. So we're tracking the data. You're technically leaving data on the table every time you go out and don't track with a platform like ours. So we bring you activity tracking in a way that's relevant to you. So I'll bring up our Garmin integration for a second, and you can actually do our archery tracking on the phone too. But our Garmin integration, if you have the watch, it'll ask you what your yardage is. It'll actually detect when you fire a shot, so it can tell from the motion and the string vibration. And then we know that when your hand drops, you've completed the shot. So it goes through this motion, counts your shots, and then when you get up to your target, it'll ask you how you did. So it's going to ask you for your groups. You shot, let's say, 3 inches. It'll ask you to take a photo. We walk you through this loop, which is the same thing you're already doing when you're shooting anyways, right? You're ranging, you're shooting, and you're assessing your shot. So the app follows the same process. And when you end that, now if you end it on the watch, we're going to kick it over to the phone and let you load it. Or if you load it did the whole thing through your phone, it's going to track all that so you can go back and see your performance as you went. What's interesting about this, people that are shooting with the Garmin have started to realize I can actually see target panic setting in because we track when the actual shot happened and I know what your heart rate was. So I can see that, hey, your heart rate's dropping 30 beats per minute in between shots, but then right before you take a shot, you're peaking out at like 110, man. You got to work on your nerves, or, hey, you need to work out more and control your breathing. And you can start to use all this stuff to really get more data from your activity that you're already doing. Again, it's data that's currently left on the table. Nobody's capturing it because guess what, Bruce? I said I was a guy that was passionate about this stuff. I'm a tech guy by nature, but here's the thing. Silicon Valley, where most of technology is developed, right? They don't typically get our audience. That's why a lot of this content gets banned from Facebook when it's reviewed by a person, because this is an audience that doesn't understand hunting. There's just, by and large, and this is a stereotype, I'm sure there are some people that hunt in the Bay Area, but by far, pretty safe to say, and this is actually self-admitted from Facebook, Twitter, they don't have a whole lot of diversity when it comes to our audience. So there's not a lot of entrepreneurial spirit coming out in the outdoor space out of that area. So we're building something that not a lot of people are focusing on. We're trying to give people data that, again, is currently being left on the table. And the archery app is a great example of being able to integrate and do that. And again, you can actually track that. You won't be able to track the heart rate without the wearable device, but you can track your shots just like what you see on the screen there. That's an archery example. You can track that right now with everything but the heart rate. It'll track your elevation instead, which is actually pretty interesting data if you're doing a total archery challenge or something. You can track 40 different activities within the platform.
Yeah, I'm sitting here just going, wait a minute, for the people that are doing challenges, I think of Corey Jacobson with Elk 101 to run a challenge. I think of my own Deer Hunting Institute coming up, and I want to have a challenge for all the membership for a Yeti cooler or Pick Your Poison, iron broadheads, or anything, or even your app. Now, how much does your app cost?
It's free, totally free.
Okay, so it's supported by Garmin and other companies that...
Yeah, right now, I mean, we're a startup, so a lot of this is, I don't know how much we're going to get in the weeds on the business side of, I don't know how much people care. It's not that I haven't. The Restless Native goes way into the weeds on this stuff, but essentially we're in startup mode. So raising money through investors and something that they believe in. This is something that they see an opportunity to build a model very much like what's being done in cycling and running and doing it for the outdoors. So we do have advertising partners, and that's where our revenue is coming. It's coming from the advertising, because here's the thing. If I'm on Facebook, there's a good chance I'm going to be retargeted to from websites that I visited or my wife. And the way that works is you actually, as much as they know about you, you can start to get a lot of irrelevant advertisements kicked back to you. And it's gotten to the point to where my wife is so paranoid she won't shop for me online before Christmas because she knows I could see advertisements about the fact that she searched for a new wallet or whatever it is. It's like they're always watching what you're doing. As much as these places know about you, they don't really understand hunters very well. So Facebook, for example, might know that you're a hunter, but the difference between a duck hunter and a deer hunter and an elk hunter and an upland hunter, like they don't at all use the same equipment, like even down to the boots and socks, like it's all different. So GoWild, as we roll out advertising, it's actually better for you as a consumer because we're going to put gear in front of you that you might actually want to buy versus like my wife shopped for shoes or a bathing suit and that's all I'm seeing on my Instagram account. Or there was like a period where I was getting all this weird maternity clothing on my Instagram account because somewhere along the lines they thought, based off of something in my machine overlap, that my wife's search habits were mine. So we know that, Bruce, if you like to whitetail hunt and upland hunt, we know how often you're going, how hardcore of a hunter you are, and we can put products in front of you that are relevant. So a great example of how we are doing this today, our client Obsession Bows and Ramcat Broadheads are obviously very archery targeted, right? So I can actually help our advertisers reach people at the peak of when they want to, or when people are most likely to realize that they need a new product. Now, this is good for users because when are you most likely to realize you need a new bow?
Do you want to become a smarter whitetail hunter, knowing when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Over the past 4 years, people have asked me, hey, I'm struggling with spending all day in the woods and never seeing a deer, only getting opportunities at doe or young bucks, leaving the woods empty-handed too many seasons. Located the deer of a lifetime, but just flat out missed. Having difficulties finding a place to hunt, recognizing mistakes that you're making over and over again, and you want to eliminate them. Having tried and failed to find qualified mentors. Well, you've come to the right place. Why? Because Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created by me, Bruce Hutchin. It's a 13-module course that'll talk about being lost in the deer hunting forest. Never hunted. What is a hunter? What is an adult onset hunter? What rules apply? Finding a mentor, choosing a weapon, finding a place to hunt, scouting a hunt location, stand sites, stand access and exit, reading sign, and when to hunt. All these are available for you at deerhuntinginstitute.com. Go now to deerhuntinginstitute.com and sign up for the best deer hunting course in America.
Probably right after you shoot, right? So we know when you end your session, and we can give you the opportunity to upgrade your bow for 15% right now, which is actually something that happens within our app right now. If you end one of those archery sessions, you can earn 15% off of an Obsession bow. Now, these are really high-end bows. That's $150 you might save off of a bow just because you used our platform. So that's the business model, is helping brands understand and get to their customers better, more efficiently. And it's great for, I'll tell you what, it's funny. We've done surveys on the advertising that we've done, just trying to get a feel for how people feel about it. And they actually like it. Like, it's almost weird at this point because we're all trained to hate advertising, right? And this is coming from the advertising guy. But people are installing ad blockers and everything because it's gotten so intrusive. But we do studies and people are like, no, it's cool. Like, I actually like learning about products if they're hyper-targeted to me. So we're doing things quite a bit differently in that it's your behavior. It's not some footprint that you've left throughout the internet. We know the things you like to do as Bruce, and we put things that are relevant in front of you as Bruce, or for Bruce, you know?
Yeah, because I know on Instagram, I get way too many ads, and I just hit not relevant, not relevant, not relevant, or it's flat out spam. Let them know that.
What's funny is the more you hit not relevant, it's like it could fix it, or they could just like not understand you at all. So they're just going to throw everything at you. It's like spaghetti against the wall.
Yeah, interesting. Now, the third part is tell your story. You touched about that, but let's deep dive into that.
Yeah, this is really the social component of it. So I love this quote by members that are listening to this. You're going to laugh at me. I always bring this guy up, but he is the quintessential example of GoWild. And he had a quote in a trophy that he's been chasing this buck all year long, and beautiful Michigan whitetail. And he had it on camera, put in tons of hours, and he had this trophy photo. And as you know, trophy photos are a little contested these days, but he had a really great comment about this photo that I love. He said, "This photo represents 1/365th of my season. My GoWild profile tells the rest." So what we're trying to embody.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. I mean, powerful stuff. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome, right? So what he's saying is, look, I've tracked this all year on my profile. I'm sharing the scouting. I'm sharing all the pain points. I mean, Mike will go out and scout sometimes, and he'll be pissed. He'll be mad about something that somebody scared off a deer with a card, or I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, trying to think of some things I've seen. But he has instances when it doesn't go well, and Mike is really great about highlighting that and showing the pain that goes into this. And I think there's something to be gained from that as an industry. We've really trained into chasing that trophy photo, but really holistically, like there's so much more to it than that. And so the tell your story part of this is everything that goes into your moment, whether that's as a angler. We were talking earlier about fishing in Alaska. You get to go up and you chase king salmon and you limit out every day. That is the best. Like that's the peak of your game that you could have done, right? Like as for that pursuit. Well, there's a lot of other stuff that you probably did to go up and be able to do that, right? Sure, there's a chance you just hired a guide, but a lot of people are putting in training. They're learning the species and they're listening to podcasts. We actually have that integration as well. You can load podcasts just like this one and go in. When you go to post, scroll down, tap a little clock, and you can search for outdoor podcast and then find any show that's on iTunes, and you can log that. And what's interesting about that is now I can say, hey, I listened to Bruce's show, and here's what I took away from it. And now we start to have dialogue around the content that doesn't exist elsewhere. Unless you go to that person's Instagram or GoWild profile, and you can interact with them if they posted about it. But that still leaves the content creator in control. So GoWild gives the control on that aspect to the listeners. So now listeners can have a voice in interacting with the content creators. And all of this goes throughout the year, essentially showing that there are other aspects to this other than a trophy photo. That's why we have a recipes functionality in our platform. And no, it's not the most used piece of our app. It's a lower engagement than anything else, but I feel personally that it's important. Recipes tend to be something that takes a little bit longer to upload, but also like you kind of got to know how to cook to have one, right? So while the activity tracking has a high percentage of people using that, podcast has a high percentage, we feel it's important to have that availability for the recipe functionality for people to be able to share that part of their story. And also as somebody that's just looking for recipes, it's nice to be able to stumble into Jeremiah Dowdy. Oh, look, there's his duck recipe that he just was posting about. Here it is. I can now go cook this. That's a part of your story. The pursuit and the food is all part of the story. So the share your story portion really goes into this evergreen functionality that we have. A lot of our competitors, a lot of people that have tried to do this have made one incredibly important mistake, in my opinion, is that they've branded their platforms or they've gone all in on hunting functionality or fishing functionality. But Bruce, I've already learned in our 30 minutes, hour of talking from you, you are more than a hunter and you're more than an angler. And we actually find that there's 70% overlap within our audience of people that like to hunt and fish. Like they do more than just one of those things. So we built a platform that helps you share that story across a variety of things. Funny enough, 68% of our audience like to just go camping. Like it's not just a hunting and fishing platform. It's really your outdoor story. So there's a lot of different angles you can take on the section of the site that you're looking at, but really the whole GoWild experience is helping you share that story.
You just mentioned something, and my takeaway is the outdoors is my life. That's my passion. That's where I spend way too much money, according to my wife.
According to the stats, too.
According to my wife.
Hunters spend an insane amount of money every year. It's like $2,800 a year is the average.
It's the average. That's the average of outdoor people, just, I believe, in the archery. Now, back in the day, I was fly fishing and I was rowing. I talked to my nephew, and he's rowing the Arkansas, which, folks, you're going to hear this later on, but it's an all-world runoff this year, but it's dangerous. 2 ladies lost their life on the Gunnison River last weekend, and this is June 25th. It's hellacious, the power of the water. But anyway, talking to my nephew, he last summer rode the Grand Canyon, so he knows his stuff. But you take people in the outdoors and you don't try to put them into a box to say, okay, if you're out there, we want to hear your story, wherever that fits, and then build the community around it. Have I got the gist of what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. And that's appealing to the companies we're working with and also the users. I mean, when we talk to a company, they realize that we can help them reach new audiences. Today, you have, if you're a clothing company, for example, and you were primarily in the fishing space, doesn't mean you'll always forever make gear that's targeted to just anglers, right? I've seen a lot of companies that start, as you grow and you want more market share, breaking into new audiences helps. So when we have an audience that we understand very well and can help market them to people that we know would be interested because we understand you so well, like that's, again, going back to being good for everybody. It's not putting a bunch of crap advertisements in front of you, and it helps you learn about things you might not have otherwise. So that's good for brands. It's good for people. Actually, I know the stats from one of our competitors. It's just not sustainable. They lose 80% of their audience come January because people are done hunting. They're going to delete the app for the year and they'll download it again maybe in September. And that's not something we wanted to do. I wanted to build something that become integrated in people's lives. A, we're building a business and we got to have something that's sustainable. But B, I don't want to be a one-trick pony that helps you map and get to something and then you delete it. Like, we really wanted to be something that provided value year-round. And to me, the education was the way to get there and to be something that you would think about. I want to be something that help you come to at least a couple times a week because you learn something every time you come. If I go back to my first story that I told you about, I had a real problem that I was trying to solve for myself. That's what's funny about this is, like, I love this app. And anytime I don't get to use it, if I'm out of service or I'm at a business conference or whatever, like, I actually miss it. And I come back and I binge 15, 20 minutes, just kind of seeing what's been going on and what all my buddies who I may have never even met before. I got people from all over the country that I've met and all over the world. There's one guy in Scotland who has been on there since the third month when we opened, before we were even on Android. I've gotten to be buddies with this guy. Like, he comes up on our podcast. People know about him, and it's a community that adds value to my life. And that's what we wanted to be more than anything. I mean, there are a lot of great utility products out there that do provide seasonal value. We wanted to be something that people look at. I don't want to have the damaging reputation that a Facebook has. It's becoming very apparent that your data might not be secure. Just quoting news articles here. This has all been playing out really publicly in the news of, you question the who's in control. Like, we've been very transparent about everything. We want everybody, like, you get messages from me and my team when you sign up. They're automated with the volume of people we see. We couldn't possibly go through and send individual messages to everybody. But here's the thing. When you reply, that's actually us that reply, like, and help you learn how to use the platform and really engage with you. At the end of the day, it's something, I would joke that we would do this for free, but I literally did this for free over, I don't know, a year and a half. Like, I just quit my job a year and a half ago to really pursue this. So this is our passion. If tomorrow we ran out of money and I had to figure out something, I would be figuring out how to get another job, working something on the side so I can keep this thing going because I love it so much.
Wow, that's just great. You were talking in Colorado, we have a bunch of 14ers, and there's a whole group of people, they have their own community that they bag 14ers. They got T-shirts and they got everything that you want. And I see that as another niche play for GoWild. And they have nothing to do with hunting. But here's the rub of that. When I was sheep hunting, I met some people that were neutral, some people that hated I was on the mountains, and some people that said, wow, you're on the mountain. You're up here with us hunting sheep. How does that work? How do you get up here? I said, same way you do. And you just camp out, timberline, you do the whole thing. So I'm doing exactly what they're doing. My goal wasn't to climb a 14er, was to hunt sheep.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I was talking, I think it was Tom Ropery, talking about reaching common ground and having open dialogue, not closed dialogue.
Yeah.
And I see, listening to you, Brad, over the last 45 minutes, talking about, okay, with a platform like this, you're going to have an eclectic group of people, leave it at that have the same platform. Then they say, well, gee, Joni fly fishes and she hunts and she's a wonderful human being.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, man, you're hitting on, it's kind of funny. People within the industry, we don't get a lot of criticism on this, but I've gotten some have said, well, you guys say you want to recruit new hunters. How are you going to do that if you have a platform just for hunters? And I said, you're really basing that in a misunderstanding of what we're doing. I mean, we have fringe people. Actually, we're adding mountain climbing functionality, or I think we're just going to call it climbing for the activity tracking, because we've had so many requests. People want to track their climbing, which is what you were alluding to a second ago. And those people may or may not hunt. So that's a chance for us to take somebody who's already enjoying outside. They're already putting all the hard work in. And when I look at who's most likely to understand what we're doing, understand the value of conservation, understand all the aspects of this thing is very complex, but we love it. Like, those are the people we stand the most chances to win, right? Going straight to the heart of the Bay Area and finding the,
please no,
finding the first like foreign sourced vegan or sweater, somebody sitting there in a sweater at a coffee shop eating a foreign sourced bagel, kind of picking on them a little bit. Like, those are not your target. That's going to be that 5%.
And that's okay.
It is totally okay. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on these polarities, and instead of looking at the people that are, it's low-hanging fruit, man. I was joking with my buddy. He got really into hiking and like doing some really hardcore mountain climbing like you were talking about. And I joked. I said, dude, all you got to do is take a weapon with you and you come back with food. You do everything you just did and you could have food. And first kind of started like getting a little defensive. I said, I'm just kidding with you, man. I'm just messing with you. And then it turned into a good conversation. He's like, I've never really thought about it like that. And all of a sudden if I followed up with another conversation, that might be somebody that becomes a hunter. And so we really see our platform as an opportunity to help people who are our best shots at getting into hunting or fishing. And as you know, especially if you're interviewing people like Tom Opry, like our conservation model depends on it. That's the way forward. The whole industry is talking about R3 right now, and for good causes. It's near and dear to my heart too.
Why don't you tell people what that is?
Yeah, it's the recruitment, retainment, and reactivation of hunters. So this is being headed up by a lot of great conservation organizations. And to be honest, we're playing a little bit of catch up because the boomers as they age out, typically people stop hunting around age 65. Not all of them, but typically statistically, that's about when you're going to stop. So we've got about 8 years left before that generational gap starts to hit. And we're going to lose about a third of our hunters. So we're already down to around 12 million. There's some data that suggests that 2018 was a good year and we had a 3 or 4 million jump, but it could go back down. It's been in decline for 20 years. So there's no reason to start patting ourselves on the back just yet. So R3 is an effort to try to get people outside, to get people active, to get people buying licenses again, because license dollars matter. I mean, that's going straight to your state. I mean, buying a duck stamp is one of the best things you can do to contribute to conservation when you look at the percentages that go back into the environment. And R3 is trying to create new hunters. We're trying to re-engage the ones that may not hunt this year. We're just busier than we've ever been as a species. We're moving into cities at a faster rate, and the lifestyle in a city is different from that of rural America. One reason I think I mentioned earlier that small game is dying. And I think a lot of that's just because we're competing with youth sports. We're competing with Fortnite and Netflix, and people have more to do than they did. And I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, and it was a pastime to go hunt. Like, yes, we had food. My family would go out I didn't go with my uncles on this trip, but they would go out for like a week-long deer hunt in a couple counties away and stay gone for all this time. And it was their vacation. That was their entertainment. Even hunting there, it was like every weekend, that was what they did. And we've lost a little bit of that demand. Getting people to buy those licenses, even on an off year when you might not hunt, really helps. And it also keeps you top of mind. Here's the flip of this. This is the rub for me. I think as an industry, it's great we're doing all this efforts. I think there's a lot of good things that are coming out of it. But I put my advertising hat on, and I kind of come back to this. I think of anytime I had to advertise something, if my advertisement was, hey, we need to sell more stuff, come buy our stuff, that's not a good advertisement. That's not a good way to position something to get somebody to buy it. That's actually very self-serving, which goes back to the relationship advice I gave at the very beginning. If you want to build a relationship, find out how you can help me. What are my needs? And that's really how advertising works too. And I really want the whole industry to look at hunting and not say, hey, this thing's dying. We got to get more people to get into this. Hey, do you want to come hunting with me? There can be some good efforts that come from that. But really the best thing we can do for this is to share how fun it is, to share the good experiences, to share the moments in nature. And Bruce, I'm sure you've had tons of these where you get to watch a raccoon wake up a raccoon shut its day down. He's coming around. He's been out all night moseying about, or a coyote's going to bed, or you hear them howling. Most people are never going to be out in nature and hear a coyote howl. There's probably more interactions with that now with suburbia, but that's a whole different conversation. But people don't know, man. Like, they don't know what they're missing. And I just think if we would advertise this as what it is and what it's always been to us, which was fun, entertainment, and great recreation, and a great way to be involved in the environment, we got a heck of a lot better chance of winning people over than just coming in super heavy-handed with, hey, we need you to hunt because it's dying. That is not appealing. And that's not a very likely to resonate message, in my opinion.
We need to can that and get that out. Probably a couple 100,000 people hear that. I just hope they listen. Because the only thing I would add simply to that, to me, hunting is a journey. It's an adventure. It started off an adventure. Now it's a journey, and it's taken me all across North America, sitting with elders in Kuujjuaq on Gava Bay and just listen to their stories about their life. Elders are typically revered in their culture. Not typically, they are revered. And everything is passed down by word. And the one thing I took away from sitting there and listening to him, he said, my life and my history of my people, it's simple. If the caribou come, we live. If they don't come, they die, or we die, period.
Wow.
That was it.
Yep.
they came across on the land bridge between Russia and Alaska. So are we talking about hunting? No, we're talking about culture. We're talking about anthropology. We're talking about terrain and weather patterns and all these things. Yet I'm a hunter.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a marvelous thing. Let's just switch it up. What are you doing to attract women to go wild, or are they just coming organically?
Originally, it was organic, and we started working with different groups. Jen Callahan is our chief marketing officer, and Jen identifies with females a little better than I do. Not that I don't, but I think you get into this industry with a lot of coming out of this a little bit, but there's been a whole lot of the shrink it and pink it, which is what happens when you have guys trying to tell women what they would like to buy or what they would like to do. And sometimes it's just best to go to the source and get an opinion of hey, how can we provide value to you as a female? And Jen's done a great job at connecting with other women in the industry and asking those questions. So we're starting to work with groups like Real Camo Girl, several hundred women. It might be 500 women. And that was kind of our first pilot with that, of giving them a place to interact with each other. They've got their own trail or forum on GoWild that they can connect with, and anybody can follow it, but it gives their group a place where they can go and discuss. We've got 2 or 3 things in motion to get to some more larger groups like that. They're structured a little bit differently. Some of them are paid membership bases or whatnot, but focusing women, this sounds like a self-help group, but it's like women empowerment group. So when a woman goes on a backcountry hunt, there are things that she might like to ask another woman about instead of you or I, Bruce. It gives them a chance to learn from each other. They can go to each other with those kind of things, but also the gear, networking for gear. I'm not going to be able to recommend a jacket for a small built woman or pants. That's where a big one for a lot of women that I talk to. They have a hard time finding brands that cater to their size differences, because the challenge the industry is finally starting to overcome with is shrink it and peak it doesn't work. The body types are different, and changing your logo out for pink and calling it a youth large, a women's small, I don't know what the size lineup is, but that doesn't work. So we're trying to find those groups, those organizations that have really been built by strong female leaders, and trying to give them a place within our platform. And really, Jen Callahan's led a lot of that efforts. I started the conversations with Real Camo Girl and Lauren Hill and Stoddard, but networking with them and just asking them for their opinion and feedback. And we've just tipped the scale of our demographic breakdown to where we're starting to trend more female than the hunting population, which we're proud of. The hunting population, it's 11%, and we just ticked upwards of 12, and it's been growing every couple weeks. We get a little bit slightly more edge towards the female content creators. So, what's funny about that, and this is not really directly related to your question, we've been looking at our data on content creators, and I don't know what this is, but because it's not, guys could make a dumb stereotypical joke here, and it's not what it sounds like. Women's content gets interacted with. When you look at our top quadrant of great content creators, they're typically women.
I would agree.
It's not anything to do with bikini shots and all that. We don't honestly see a whole lot of that in GoWild because it's not a hackable format. Like volume alone is not going to drive up your reach. And that's been in the news even recently. I think Vox may have seen this, had a huge 5,000 word write-up on the Gun Bunny, and that's their title, but talking about female influencers. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people like Jen Danella, who is an incredible archer. She can shoot 100 yards with her bow, and she is very accurate, hunts bears, and travels all over the country hunting. And she's highly engaged within our platform. Ali Schreiber, who is a tiny little girl from Alabama who noodles for catfish, and she's not doing anything. It's not sexualized content. It's educational. She's helping people learn. She's showing them how she does it, and she's very open that she's learning how to do it along with them. And I think of the top 3 or 4 people, and they're females in that whole quadrant. Aline, even though we have a smaller population of females, there's something about women that they know how to curate content a little bit better than we do. We haven't quite figured it out yet as guys.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show tonight. Before we go, can I take a moment and say thank you? Listen, as we started the Whitetail Rendezvous podcast journey, we had no idea what to expect. But after 4 years, we received a ton of feedback from our over 400,000 listeners and climbing to 500,000. Speaking of which, we are now closing in on over 600 featured guests. Thank you. And a quick shout out to all those who have left an iTunes review and your feedback. I get those and really appreciate it. And it's awesome to see what you have to say, and we do read every single one of them. And I just want you to know that I am incredibly grateful for your kind words regarding the show. And all of the ratings and reviews help us attract more listeners. And if you're one of those new listeners, welcome. Great to have you. By the way, if you haven't taken the time to rate and review our show and like the Hunting on Private Land strategy on how to get permission to hunt a private property, go to whitetailrendezvous.com as a special gift for just rating and reviewing our show. When you get there, look for the start button to get the details. Listen, I'll share you the top technique from some of the top hunters in the country on how do they get permission to hunt on private land. I'll share with you the exact techniques they use to get permission. As my way of saying thanks for rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. So join us next time. And remember, we're all on this journey together, learning, sharing, and becoming 365 hunters.
One thing with the ladies that I've had, and Meadow Caulfield as a co-host for Whitetail Rendezvous podcast, and she's the chair of R3 in the state of Minnesota. But what it is with women, they take time, they listen, and they empower, but they're educators and they share in a safe place. Because guys, we've been jerks, we've been stupid, we haven't done it right for women, and we haven't. So all of a sudden, women are going to rely on other women to get them where they want to go. Because I think of title adult onset hunters, where people are becoming hunters because they want to feed their families. No other reason. Becoming hunters simply because they realize enough of this food that's crap. I'm going to go out and kill a deer and have organic venison for my family all year round. And then I'll move up to an elk. And along the way, I'm going to shoot predators because I want to have more deer.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was at the R3 conference last year, and state agencies have started shifting their focus to moms instead of dads. For years, they thought dad's the head of the household. Dad's the key to getting the family outside. But if dad hunts, typically dad hunts. If mom hunts, mom takes the kids with her. You, by natural progress or the evolution of that, the mother, as much as guys don't want to hear it, mom makes the decisions in the household. And this rang true from my experience outside of hunting. I had a plumbing client for years, and you would think the dad would be the family decision maker on plumber to hire. It's not. It's the female. She's going to be the one that's going to take action and get it done. And all of our data said that mom made the household decisions. And I'm finding that to be true when it comes to hunting too. And state agencies are now targeting programs around getting mom and the kids. They're educating them together. There is something to this. And I think while the industry has been slow to adopt in some ways, there's a lot of momentum right now to get more women involved. And what's funny, man, when I started this whole thing, I told you I started with a bunch of research. On the firearms side, women were growing like 77% over a 5-year period. I mean, in terms of just target shooters. So I think there's a lot of, maybe it's some barriers that have been lifted from some gender norms, or I don't know what it is. There's never one thing, right? It's never just one thing, but there's definitely more females getting involved. And for us, going back to your original question of like, what are you doing? Honestly, it's just listening, trying to listen to them, talk to them, engage with them, and build a platform that caters to them, like, and makes them feel comfortable to post within our platform.
And you have a lady headlining your app also.
Yeah, we do.
And Danella?
That's Jen Danella right there. It's kind of funny. When we started this whole thing, I met her on Instagram. She had like, 7,000 followers. So we started working with her because we liked her content. Dude, she's blown up. I don't know. She's probably approaching 80,000 followers on Instagram now because people like her. She educates. She's real. She's actually one of our paid influencers now because we believe in her so much and what she's doing and her story. That's really important to us, is her story and how she tells it, the way she's willing to help other people get into it.
Well, good for you. We've gone almost an hour here. In summary, how do you want to wrap up? And one, tell people how to find you.
Yep.
And then just wrap up.
For the ease, there's 2 URLs, one of which you can see here, timetogowild.com. But we have an easy one just to get you straight to download it, which is downloadgowild.com. If you go to downloadgowild.com, it's going to take you right to the download page. We're on Android and iOS. You'll find both of those links there. We're on Garmin, and that'll have a link. And actually, I'm just now realizing that links to our hunting app. We just launched our fishing app recently. So I need to get an updated link in there. So if you have a Garmin Fenix 5X Plus or 5X or a Tactics Charlie, you can download our app on your watch. And if you just have a Garmin, you can actually connect your Garmin to your GoWild account and pull in any of your activities you're running, or we can pull that in as well. You just won't be able to use our GoWild apps. So again, download GoWild.com. If you want to listen to our podcast, if you're interested in some of my conservation comments and some of the R3 stuff, I can go on about this for dozens of hours, and I have. I think we just launched our 71st show on Restless Native. So anywhere you get a podcast, you can look up Restless Native, and we will have all kinds of great interviews on there. It's funny, man. A lot of people come into the brand different ways, right? It's not all like app users that found the podcast. I have a lot of people who are diehard, listen to every show, and they use the app 2 or 3 times a month when they get out and hunt and fish. And that's okay. Like, we want to be involved with you however you can. So check out the podcast. We've got some really great shows on there. We've had First Light on, Adam Weatherby. The guys from Sportsman's Alliance were just on talking about all the different things they're doing for conservation. Well, not for hunter rights. It's a little bit different than conservation, but check out the podcast. I think it's a great place to start if you're curious.
Well, Brad Luttrell, thank you so much for being a guest on Whitetail Rendezvous, and I'll let you know when this is coming up. Brad's an interesting guy, and he sees things differently than some of the other folks that have apps out there, and there's a lot of upside to what he's doing, because the biggest thing that I know that I've been able to do is build community in the whitetail space. That's important, because that's going to boost the R3 initiatives that we're all concerned about.
Yep.
And so, Brad, thank you again for taking your time and sharing with us, because you've been awesome.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.